Most folks in that supermarket saw nothing unusual. But Ethan Morales noticed a little girl's hand moving in a way that didn't seem right. Just a quiet signal most would have missed. But following her that day would lead to a truth. No child should have to live with, and a chance to bring her back to the arms she belonged in. Before we dive into this, hit the subscribe button and tell us from where in the world you're watching from. Let me tell you about Ethan first. You can't understand the man without knowing the boy. Ethan Morales grew up in a house where justice wasn't just an idea. It was dinner conversation. His father, Miguel, had walked the thin blue line for 37. Years before a bullet in the shoulder and arthritis in his knees convinced him to hang up his badge. Treatment didn't stop Miguel from teaching his boy the sacred art of seeing. "Mio," Miguel would say, settling into his worn leather chair. That smelled of old spice and old memories. A badge doesn't make you a protector. Eyes do. Learn to see what others miss. The woman who flinches when her husband raises his voice. The kid who wears long sleeves in summer. The teenager who suddenly got expensive things but no job. Young Ethan would nod, absorbing these lessons. Like gospel, he learned that evil didn't always announce itself with sirens and flashing lights. Sometimes it wore a smile. Sometimes it bought groceries and coached Little League. Sometimes it lived next door and borrowed your lawnmower Dot by the time Ethan pinned on his own badge at 23. Those lessons had settled deep in his bones. He could spot a lie at 50 paces, sense fear in a handshake, read desperation in the way someone avoided eye contact. His fellow officers called it intuition. Miguel called it la vista del alma, the sight of the soul. But even with all that training, all those years of learning to see, nothing could have prepared Ethan for what he witnessed that Tuesday in aisle 7. The clock on the precinct wall read 2:47 p.m. when Ethan decided to make a quick stop at Henderson's. His shift didn't end for another 3 hours, but his partner Rodriguez had a stomach bug, leaving Ethan to patrol solo. A man's got to eat, he reasoned, and Henderson's made a decent turkey sandwich. The automatic doors slid open with their familiar whisper. Inside, the supermarket hummed with afternoon energy mothers with strollers, elderly folks moving at their own pace, teenagers making too much noise in the candy aisle. Normal. Safe. Or so it seemed. Ethan grabbed a handbasket and made his way toward the deli counter, his trained eye sweeping the store out of habit. That's when he first noticed them. A man and a little girl near the cereal display. Nothing unusual at first glance, just another guardian and child doing their shopping. But something in their body language made Ethan pause. The man's grip on. The girl's wrist was too tight. His laugh was too loud, too forced. And the child the child looked like she was drowning in plain sight. She couldn't have been more than 7, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and clothes that were clean, but didn't quite fit right. Her eyes God, those eyes darted around like a trapped animal searching for escape. Every time someone walked past, she seemed to shrink further into herself. The man with her was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of stubble that suggested he'd given up caring about appearances. His jeans were stained, his t-shirt wrinkled, and when hesmeled at other shoppers, it never quite reached his eyes. He kept one hand firmly planted on the girl's shoulder, fingers digging in just enough to leave marks. "Uncle Joe loves his Lily. Don't you, sweetheart?" the man said loudly as a young mother passed with her toddler. The woman smiled politely and moved on, missing entirely the way Lily's shoulders tensed at the sound of her name. But Ethan saw. Ethan always saw. He pretended to examine breakfast cereals while keeping the pair in his peripheral vision. The man, Uncle Joe, apparently was performing, putting on a show for anyone who might be watching. But performances have tells, and this one reeked of desperation. "Pick out what you want for breakfast, honey," Joe said, his voice carrying that artificial sweetness adults use when they're trying too hard. "Uncle Joe wants to make sure you eat good." Lily's hand moved toward a box of cornflakes, then stopped. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the generic brand instead. Joe's grip on her shoulder tightened. "The good stuff, Lily. We talked about this." That's when it happened. In the split second when Joe turned to flag down a store clerk, Lily looked directly at Ethan. Her small hand moved quickly, deliberately. 3 fingers against her palm. Thumb over. The signal lasted maybe 2 seconds before her hand dropped back to her side. But Ethan had seen it. More importantly, he understood it. The help signal created by the Canadian Women's Foundation, spread through social media, taught in schools and shelters. A silent way to communicate distress when speaking. Aloud wasn't safe. Most adults barely knew it existed. But this 7-year-old girl had just executed it with the precision of someone who'd practiced it in mirrors, hoping she'd never need to use it. Ethan's blood turned to ice water. His hand instinctively moved to his radio, then stopped. Protocol demanded observation, documentation, careful procedure. But every instinct Miguel had drilled into him screamed that protocol might be too slow. He watched Joe guide Lily toward the checkout lanes, his palm still pressed possessively to her back. A man's head swiveled constantly, checking faces. Exits, security cameras. The behavior of someone who knew he didn't belong here. Someone running from something. Or someone. As they joined the checkout line, Lily glanced back one more time. Her eyes found Ethan's across the crowded store. And in that moment, he saw a lifetime of hurt compressed into 7 short years. This wasn't just fear. It was the bone-deep terror of a child who'd learned that adults couldn't always be trusted, that sometimes the monsters wore familiar faces. Ethan abandoned his handbasket and moved toward the front of the store, staying far. Enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to act if needed. His heart hammered against his ribs. He watched Joe pay for their groceries cash only. Bills peeled from a thick roll like he was used to staying off the grid. The checkout clerk, a teenager with purple streaks in her hair, smiled at Lily. "Are you excited about your cereal, honey?" Lily opened her mouth to answer, but Joe's hand moved to her neck. Not roughly, but firm enough to send a message. The girl's mouth closed without a sound. "She's shy," Joe explained with that practiced smile. "Been through a lot lately. Lost her mama in a car accident. I'm all she's got now." The clerk's expression softened with sympathy. "Oh, you poor thing. Well, you're lucky to have such a caring uncle." Ethan felt sick. The lie rolled off Joe's tongue so smoothly. It had clearly been rehearsed. How many times had he used that story? How many well-meaning strangers had bought it without question? As they headed toward the parking lot, Ethan made his choice. Miguel's voice echoed in his memory. Sometimes Mio, doing right means breaking rules. He followed them into the afternoon heat, his hand resting on the radio, clipped to his shoulder. The parking lot stretched before them, mostly empty except for a scattering of cars and shopping carts, abandoned between parking spaces. Joe led Lily toward an old sedan parked in the far corner, away from other vehicles, away from security cameras, away from witnesses. That's when Lily made her second plea for help. She stumbled deliberately. Ethan realized, and when Joe yanked her upright, she looked directly at him again. This time, her lips moved in a single silent word. "Help." Ethan hit the lights on his patrol car. The red and blue lights cut through the afternoon haze like a beacon of reckoning. Joe froze, his hand still gripping Lily's arm, and for one perfect moment, Ethan could see the calculation happening behind the man's eyes. Fight or flight, lie, or run. He chose to lie. "Afternoon, officer," Joe called out, that artificial smile sliding back into place like a mask he'd worn too many times. Beautiful day, isn't it? Ethan approached slowly, his hand resting casually on his belt. Years of experience had taught him that the most dangerous moments often looked the most ordinary. A parking lot conversation, a routine traffic stop, a man with a little girl and a bag of groceries. Indeed it is, Ethan replied, his voice carrying the easy authority that came with the badge. Mind if I ask you folks a few questions? Of course. Not, Joe said, but his grip on Lily tightened. Always happy to help the boys in blue. I'm Joe Patterson, by the way. This is my niece, Lily. Ethan studied the girl's face. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into features too young to carry such weight. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. A faint bruise in her wrist was mostly hidden by her long-sleeved shirt in 80-degree weather. Hello, Lily, Ethan said gently, crouching down to her eye level. How are you doing today, sweetheart? The girl's mouth opened slightly, but Joe's fingers pressed into her shoulder. The message was clear. Stay quiet. She's been having a tough time lately, Joe explained, his voice taking on that practiced tone of concerned guardian. Lost her mother in a terrible accident about 6 months ago. Still adjusting to living with Uncle Joe. Aren't you, honey? Lily nodded, but her eyes never left Ethan's face. In them, he could see a desperate intelligence, a child who understood far more than she should about the ways adults could hurt each other. I'm sorry for your loss, Ethan said, meaning it. Whether Joe's story was true or not, this little girl had clearly suffered trauma. Where are you folks headed today? Home, Joe answered quickly. Got some errands to run. Thought we'd pick up some groceries. Lily here has been asking for those fancy cereals kids like. But something in the way he said home made Ethan's instincts flare. It carried the weight of Allie, delivered just a beat too fast. And where would home be, Mr. Patterson? Joe's smile flickered for just a moment so brief that anyone else might have missed it. But Ethan had spent years learning to read the spaces between words, the pauses between heartbeats. Over on Maple Street, Joe said. The blue house with the white trim. You might know it, Oldmus. Henderson used to live there before she passed. Ethan knew Maple Street, had patrolled it hundreds of times. There was no blue house with white trim. Mrs. Henderson had lived on Oak Street, and she'd moved to a nursing home 2 years ago. Maple Street, Ethan repeated, pulling out his notepad with deliberate slowness. What number owned Maple? The pause was barely perceptible, but it was. There. Joe's eyes darted to the car, to the parking lot exits, back to Ethan's face. 47, he said finally. Another lie. 47 Maple Street was a vacant lot where a house had burned down 3 years ago. Mind if I see some identification? Mr. Patterson? Just routine. Now Joe's smile turned tight at the edges. Of course, officer. Though I have to say, I'm a little confused about what this is regarding. We were just doing some shopping. He reached for his back pocket, and Ethan noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Not the tremor of nervousness, the tremor of someone coming down from something. Drugs, maybe, oral coal. Either way, it made him unpredictable. The ID Joe produced was worn, creased, and when Ethan examined it, clearly fake. The hologram was wrong. The font slightly off. Joseph Patterson of no fixed address, according to Felisense, though the photo barely resembled the man standing before him. This is interesting, Ethan said, handing the license back. Mr. Patterson, I'm going to need you to place your hands on the hood of the car. Wait, what? Joe's facade cracked completely. What's this about? I haven't done anything wrong. We're just shopping, for Christ's sake. Hands on the hood, sir. Now. Joe's eyes darted to Lily, then to the car keys in his hand, then to the open spaces of the parking lot. For a moment, Ethan thought he might bolt. But running would mean leaving the girl behind, and whatever Joe was hiding, Lily was clearly central to it. "This is harassment," Joe muttered, but he complied, placing his palms flat against the war metal of the car. "I want to call a lawyer." "That's your right," Ethan agreed, beginning to pat him down. "But first, let's talk about why you just gave me a fake ID and an address that doesn't exist." Joe's body went rigid. "I don't know what you're talking about. 47 Maple Street burned down 3 years ago, Mr. Patterson. There's nothing there but a foundation and some weeds. Want to try again?" Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. In the distance, a shopping cart rattled across asphalt. A car door slammed. Normal afternoon sounds that seemed impossibly far away from this moment of reckoning. That's when Lily spoke for the first time. "My name isn't Lily." The words were so soft, Ethan almost missed them. But Joe heard, and his whole body tensed like a spring about to snap. "Lily, honey, you're confused," he said, his voice carrying a warning that made the girl flinch. "Remember what we talked about? About staying quiet while the grown-ups talk?" But something had shifted in the child's posture. Maybe it was seeing Joe helpless against Thacker, or maybe it was recognizing that this police officer was different from the others she'd encountered. Either way, she found her voice. "My mama calls me Sarah," she said, louder this time. "Sarah Michelle Torres, and that man isn't my uncle." The world seemed to stop. Joe's hands pressed harder against the car hood, his knuckles white with tension. Ethan felt his training kick in the careful calm that descended when a situation went from routine to dangerous. "Sarah," he said gently, not taking his eyes off Joe, "where is your mama?" "I don't know." The words came out in a rush, like water through a broken dam. "He said shouldn't want me anymore. He said she told him to take me away. But Mama wouldn't do that. She wouldn't leave me with him. She's confused," Joe said desperately. "Traumatized. Kids her age, they make up stories, mix up reality with—" "Shut up." Ethan's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't say another word." He keyed his radio, never taking his eyes off the man against the car. "Unit 47 to dispatch." "Go ahead, 47. I need backup at Henderson Supermarket, parking lot. Possible kidnapping in progress. And get me a social worker, someone who specializes in children." "Copy that. 47. Units responding. ETA 5 minutes." As they waited, Ethan found himself studying the little girl who'd called herself Lily, but was really Sarah. 7 years old and already fluent in the language of survival. Smart enough to signal for help. Brave enough to speak the truth when it mattered most. But what haunted him was the question behind her words. If this man wasn't her uncle, and her mother hadn't given her away, then where was Tasha Torres? And what had happened to Makia's 7-year-old girl disappear into a stranger's custody? The answers, Ethan suspected, would be darker than the lies Joe Patterson had been telling. But as the sound of approaching sirens began to fill the air, he made a silent promise to that frightened little girl. Whatever the truth was, wherever her mama might be, he would find her. Some promises, after all, are too sacred to break. The interrogation room at the precinct smelled of industrial disinfectant and desperation. Joe Patterson, if that was even his real name, sat hunched over a scarred metal table, his fake ID and wallet contents spread before him like evidence of a life built on lies. Detective Maria Santos had taken over the case the moment backup arrived at Henderson's. Santos was a woman who understood predators, having spent 15 years specializing in crimes against children. She had the kind of steady presence that could make a child feel safe and a criminal feel exposed. When she looked at Joe across that table, it was like watching a surgeon examine a tumor. "Let's start simple," Santos said, settling into her chair with the patience of someone who'd known Athos dance 1,000 times What's your real name? Joe's lawyer, a public defender, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, leaned forward. My client doesn't have to. Jake Morrison, Joe said suddenly, cutting off his attorney. The name fell from his lips like a confession he'd been carrying too long. Better, Santos said, making a note. Now, Jake Morrison, let's talk about Sarah Torres, because that little girl in the next room, she's got some interesting things to say about how she ended up with you. Through the one-way glass, Ethan watched the interview unfold while social worker Vanessa Reyes worked with Sarah. Vanessa was a miracle worker, one of those rare people who could code truth from traumatized children with the gentleness of a grandmother and the skill of a therapist. Can you tell me about your mama, Sarah? Vanessa asked. Her voice soft as cotton. Sarah sat in a chair too big for her small frame, swinging her legs and clutching a stuffed elephant Vanessa had given her. The fear was still there in her eyes, but it was tempered now by something that might have been hope. Mama's name is Tasha, Sarah said. Tasha Michelle Torres. She works at the diner on 5th Street, the one with the blue sign. She makes the best pancakes in the whole world. That sounds wonderful, Vanessa said. When was the last time you saw your mama? Sarah's face scrunched in concentration. I don't know. A long time. A man Jake he come to our apartment. Mama was crying. There was blood on her face. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Blood on Tasha's face. That painted a picture no one wanted to see. What happened after Jake came to your apartment? Mama told me to go to Mrs. Rodriguez next door. She said she'd come get me soon, but she never did. Jake came instead. He said Mama didn't want me anymore. He said she told him to take me far away. In the interrogation room, Santos was pressing harder. Where's Tasha Torres, Jake? I don't know, Jake mumbled, not meeting her eyes. She called me, said she couldn't handle the kid anymore. Asked me to take her. Funny thing about that story, Santos said, sliding a photograph across the table. We found this in Sarah's backpack. The photo showed a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, pulled back in a ponytail, clearly Sarah's mother. But it was the back of the photo that made Jake's face go pale. In careful handwriting, someone had written, "If found, please don't return to him. Call police. TT. Don't return to him," Santos read aloud. Sounds like Tasha Torres was running from me and Jake. Sounds like she was scared. Who was she scared of? Jake's hands shook as he reached for his water cup. I want to make a deal. His lawyer tried to intercede, but Jake was already talking, the words spilling out like water through a cracked dam. His name is Marcus Vega. Tasha's boyfriend-ex-boyfriend. Real piece of work. When she tried to leave him, he went nuts. Threatened to kill her, kill the kid, kill anyone who helped her. So she asked you to take Sarah? Not exactly. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. She asked me to watch Sarah while she went to a women's shelter. Said she'd be back in a few days. But Marcus found out where she was. Showed up at my place looking for them both. The room went dead quiet. Santos leaned forward. What did you tell him? I panicked. Told him Tasha never showed up, that I hadn't seen her or the kid. He didn't believe me at first, but Sarah was hiding in the closet, and he didn't find her. Where's Tasha now, Jake? I don't know. Marcus left, said he'd keep looking. That was 6 months ago. I kept waiting for Tasha to contact me, but she never did. I figured maybe Marcus found her, or maybe she just decided to disappear and start over somewhere else. So you just kept Sarah? For 6 months? Jake's face crumpled. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't call the police. Marcus has connections. Couldn't put her in the system. He'd find her there. I thought I was protecting her. Santos studied him with the cold assessment of someone who'd heard every excuse in the book. By giving her a fake name? By moving from place to place? By never letting her go to school or see a doctor. I was scared, Jake admitted. I'm not a bad guy, detective. I never hurt her. I just ... I didn't know what else to do. The truth, Ethan realized as he watched the interview, was probably somewhere in the middle. Jake Morrison wasn't a monster. He was a scared man who'd made a series of bad choices. But those choices had cost Sarah 6 months of her childhood. 6 months of wondering if her mother had abandoned her. 6 months of living like a ghost. The real monster was still out there. Marcus Vega, whoever he was, had created this whole tragedy with his threats and violence. Tasha had run to protect her daughter, trusted Jake to keep Sarah safe, and then vanished into whatever hell men like Marcus Vega created for women who dared to leave them. Detective, Vanessa's voice came through the intercom. You need to hear this. In the other room, Sarah was speaking quietly, her small hands folded in her lap. Mama has a special hiding place, she was saying. When the bad man would come over, she'd tell me to go there and stay quiet until she came to get me. It's behind the water heater in the basement of Mrs. Chun's house. Mama said if something ever happened to her, I should go there and wait. Vanessa looked up at the one-way glass. Sarah, do you remember where Mrs. Chun lives? On Rosewood Street. The yellow house with the cat statues in the yard. Ethan was all ready, reaching for his radio, when Santos burst through the interrogation room door. We need to check that address, she said. If Tasha Torres is alive, if she's been hiding ... I'm on it, Ethan replied, but something in Santos's expression stopped him. There's something else, she said quietly. Jake's been talking. Says Marcus Vega isn't just some abusive boyfriend. He's connected drugs, guns, human trafficking. And according to Jake, he's been looking for Tasha and Sarah this whole time. If we find her, if she's still alive, we need to be prepared for the possibility that he's been watching that house. Ethan felt the weight of his father's lessons settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about training a mother and daughter anymore. This was about walking into the kind of darkness that swallowed people whole. But as he looked through the glass at Sarah, brave little Sarah, who'd learned to signal for help and hadn't given up hope that her mama was still out there, he knew there was no choice to make. Some lights are worth walking into the darkness to find. The yellow house at 1247 Rosewood Street looked like it had given up on hope sometime in the last decade. Paint peeled from its clapboard siding like old skin, and the front porch sagged under the weight of too many harsh winters. But the cat statues Sarah had mentioned were there, a dozen ceramic felines scattered across what had once been a garden, their painted eyes watching the street with eternal vigilance. Ethan sat in his patrol car half a block away, waiting for the backup Santos had promised. The neighborhood was quiet in the way that only mid-afternoon suburban streets could be. Children still in school, adults still at work, houses keeping their secrets behind drawn curtains. His radio crackled. Unit 47, this is Detective Santos. We're 5 minutes out. Do not approach residence until we arrive. Copy that, Ethan replied, but his eyes never left the yellow house. Somewhere behind those weathered walls, Tasha Torres might be hiding. Or she might be dead. After 6 months' obsolescence, both possibilities felt equally likely. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Sarah drew a picture of the basement hiding spot, dot behind water heater, through small door, marked with purple crayon. She says her mama always wore her lucky bracelet silver with a blue stone. Ethan studied the house through his binoculars. No movement in the windows. No car in the driveway. But something about the place felt ... occupied. Maybe it was the way one upstairs curtain hung slightly askew, or the fact that the mailbox looked recently used despite Thepperpurdy's abandoned appearance. Van pulled up behind him, Santos and 2 uniformed officers from the domestic violence unit. They climbed out quietly, checking their weapons and radios. with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this before. "What do you think?" Santos asked as she approached Ethan's car. "Hard to say, place looks empty, but ... He gestured at the mailbox. "Someone's been getting mail. And that garden, it's overgrown, but somebody's been watering those plants by the front step." Santos nodded. "We do this by the book. Front, end, back covered, knock and announce, then systematic search if we don't get a response. If Tasha Torres is in there, she's been hiding for 6 months. She's going to be scared." They approached the house in formation, Santos and Ethan to the front door, the two uniform circling to cover the back exit. The wooden steps creaked under their weight, and Ethan noticed that the cat statues weren't just decorative. They were positioned to provide sight lines of the entire street. Someone had been very careful about security. Santos knocked firmly on the front door. "Police, we're looking for Tasha Torres." "Ma'am, if you're in there, we're here to help. Your daughter Sarah is safe." Silence stretched between them like held breath. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A car drove by without slowing. Then, so faintly that Ethan almost missed it, came the sound of movement from somewhere deep inside the house. Santos knocked again. "Ms. Torres? My name is Detective Maria Santos. We have your daughter, Sarah. She's been asking for you. She's safe, but she needs her mama." This time, the response was clearer. Footsteps, cautious and slow, moving toward the front of the house. A shadow passed behind the peephole. "Sarah?" The voice was female, barely above a whisper. "You have Sarah?" "Yes, ma'am. She's at the police station with a social worker. She's the one who told us where to find you." The sound of locks being turned, multiple locks. Ethan counted at least 4. The door opened a crack, held by a security chain, and a woman's face appeared in the gap. Dark hair, haunted eyes, and a bone-deep exhaustion that spoke of months spent. Looking over her shoulder, "Is she hurt?" Tasha Torres asked, and the pain in her voice was like a physical thing. "She's fine," Santos said gently. "Scared and missing her mama, but not hurt. Miss Torres, we need to talk. There's a lot we need to sort out, but first, we need to know. Are you safe? Is Marcus Vega still looking for you?" At the mention of Marcus's name, Tasha's face went white. Her hand moved instinctively to her throat, where Ethan could see the faint yellow remnant of an old bruise. "He doesn't know where I am," she whispered. "I've been careful. I've been so careful." "We know," Santos said. "But Ms. Torres, we need you to come with us. There are things we need to discuss about Sarah's situation, and we need to make sure you're both protected." The chain came off with a rattle, and Tasha Torres stepped onto her porch for the first time in 6 months. She was thin, too thin. Her clothes hung loose on a frame that had clearly missed too many meals. But her eyes, when they looked at Santos, held a fierce intelligence that spoke of a woman who'd survived by being smart. "Where is she?" Tasha asked. "Can I see her now?" "Soon," Santos promised. "But first, we need to know about Jake Morrison. Did you ask him to take Sarah?" Tasha's face crumpled. "I was supposed to go back for her. It was only supposed to be for a few days, just until I could get to the shelter and figure out a plan. But Marcus found me there. He almost killed me." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing scars on her forearm that looked like defensive wounds. "I had to disappear completely. I couldn't risk leading him to Sarah." "So you've been here all this time?" "Mrs. Chun was my landlady before Marcus started coming around. When she heard what was happening, she offered me this place. Her late husband's mother used to live here. It's not in any database, no lease agreement, just ... a place to hide." Ethan stepped forward. "Ms. Torres, your daughter is remarkable. Do you know she learned the help signal? She used it to get my attention at the grocery store." Tasha's eyes filled with tears. I taught her that. I taught her lots of things, hoping she'd never need to use them. Is she angry with me? For leaving her? She loves you, Santos said simply. She never stopped, believing you were coming back. As they walked toward the patrol cars, Ethan found himself thinking about the resilience of the human spirit. Tasha Torres had spent 6 months living like a ghost, surviving on hope and the belief that her sacrifice had kept her daughter safe. Sarah had spent 6 months with a stranger, holding on to the memory of a mother who made the world's best pancakes. But as they reached the cars, his radio crackled with the voice that would change everything. All units, be advised. We have reports of a Marcus Vega heading toward the downtown area. Subject is considered armed and extremely dangerous. He's been asking questions about a missing woman and child. Repeat, all units be advised. Tasha heard it too. Her face went dead white, and she grabbed Santos's arm with surprising strength. He found us, she whispered. He always finds us. And in that moment, Ethan realized their troubles were far from over. Marcus Vega was still hunting, still dangerous. And now that they'd found Tasha, they'd also painted a target on their backs. The reunion they'd all been hoping for would have to. Wait. First, they had to make sure there would be a future for Tasha and Sarah to share. The precinct felt different when predators were prowling outside its walls. Officers moved with heightened awareness. Conversations dropped to whispers, and everyone kept one eye on the security monitors that showed the parking lot and surrounding. Streets. Tasha Torres sat in the victim services room, clutching a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Through the reinforced glass window, she could see the hallway where other officers passed back and forth. But her mind was elsewhere, lost in 6 months of hiding, of looking over her shoulder, of jumping at every unexpected sound. He'll find. U.S., she said for the 3rd time, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus always finds what he's looking for. Santos sat across from her, patient as stone. Tell me about him, Tasha. Help us understand what we're dealing with. Tasha's hand moved, unconsciously to her throat, fingers tracing the place where Marcus had tried to strangle her the last time. He wasn't always like this. When we first started dating, he was charming, protective, said he wanted to take care of me and Sarah. She paused, staring into her coffee, as if it held answers to questions she'd never wanted to ask. But protection turned into control. He wanted to know where I went, who I talked to, what I did every minute of every day. When I tried to pull back, he'd get angry. And when Marcus gets angry, she rolled up her sleeves, revealing scars that told a story no mother should have to tell. The night I decided to leave, he came home drunk and high on something. Started screaming about Sarah, saying she wasn't his kid, so why should he have? To look at her, he grabbed a kitchen knife. Tasha's voice broke. I got between them. Told Sarah to run to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. The cuts on my arms, that's from trying to get the knife away from him. Santos leaned forward. That's when you contacted Jake Morrison? Jake lived downstairs. He heard the screaming, came up. To help. Marcus was passed out Python, but I knew he'd wake up eventually. Jake said he'd watch Sarah while I went to the shelter, just for a few days, until I could figure out a plan. But Marcus found you at the shelter. Tasha nodded, tears streaming down her face. He had connections everywhere. Cops, social workers, people at the shelters. Someone told him where I was. He showed up the second night, broke my ribs, said if I ever tried to leave again, he'd kill Sarah first and make me watch. So you ran. What choice did I have? If I went back to Jake's, Marcus would find Sarah. If I tried to take her with me, he'd track us down. The only way to keep her safe was to disappear completely and hope Jake would take care of her until I could figure out how to stop Marcus permanently. Down the hall, Ethan watched through another window as Vanessa worked with Sarah, the little girl. had drawn picture after picture her mama, their old apartment, Jake's car, the yellow house with the cat statues. But in every drawing, there was a shadow figure with angry eyes and big hands. Marcus Vega, even in a child's artwork, looked like the monster he was. "Sarah," Vanessa said gently, "you've been very brave. Your mama is here now, and she's safe." "Can I see her?" Sarah asked, looking up from her crayons. "I want to tell her about the signal." "Even to tell her I remembered. Very soon, sweetheart. The police officers just need to make sure everything is safe first." That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing the precinct in an eerie red glow. Ethan's radio erupted with chatter. "All units, we have a power failure at the main station. Backup generators are operational." But Ethan knew this wasn't a random power failure. Somewhere in the building, an alarm began to wail, the one that meant someone had breached the outer perimeter. Santos appeared beside him, weapon drawn. "He's here. How could he know? Marcus has informants everywhere. Could be anyone, a dispatcher, a clerk. Hell, could be one of us." Her face was grim as she spoke into her radio. "This is Detective Santos. I need all available units to respond to the main station. We have a credible threat against witnesses in protective custody." Ethan moved toward the victim services room where Tasha was now standing, pressed against the window, her eyes wide with the terror that came from 6 months of being hunted. "He's here," she whispered when she saw him. "I can feel him." "We're going to protect you," Ethan said, but even as the words left his mouth, he wondered if they were true. Marcus Vega had found Tasha at a secure women's shelter. He'd tracked down Jake Morrison, despite the man's efforts to stay hidden. What was to stop him from walking into a police station? The answer came in the form of smoke drifting under the door. "Fire in the building," someone shouted. "We need to evacuate." But Ethan knew better. This wasn't a fire, it was a smoke screen. Marcus was forcing them to choose between staying in a building that might be burning or walking out into the open, where he could be waiting. Santos appeared in the doorway. "We're moving to the safe room in the basement now." The safe room was a remnant from the Cold War, a reinforced concrete bunker designed to protect vital personnel from nuclear attack. It had been retrofitted with modern security systems, but at its heart, it was still what it had always been, a place to hide when the world above became too dangerous. They moved quickly through corridors filled with smoke and flashing emergency lights. Tasha held Sarah's hand so tightly the little girl winced, but she didn't complain. She could sense the danger, even if she didn't understand it. The safe room door was 3 inches of steel backed by concrete. Once inside, they were as secure as modern technology could make them. But Ethan knew that security was an illusion. Marcus Vega had already proven he could get to anyone, anywhere. "Mama," Sarah said, looking up at Tasha for the first time in 6 months. "I knew you'd come back." Tasha dropped to her knees, pulling her daughter into an embrace that seemed to heal something broken in both of them. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I had to leave you." "It's okay, Mama. Jake took care of me. He's not a bad man, just scared like us." Watching them, Ethan felt something shift in his understanding of the case. This wasn't just about domestic violence or kidnapping, or even this corruption that had allowed Marcus to hunt them for so long. This was about the lengths people would go to protect the ones they loved, and the price they were willing to pay for that protection. Santos's radio crackled. "Detective, we have a situation upstairs. Subject has been apprehended attempting to breach the main floor. One Marcus Vega is in custody." The relief in the room was palpable. Tasha sagged against the wall, 6 months of tension finally leaving her body. Sarah looked between her mother and the adults around them, trying to understand what had just happened. "Is the bad man gone?" she asked. "Yes, baby. Tasha whispered. "He's gone." But even as she said it, Ethan could see the doubt in her eyes. Men like Marcus Vega had a way of reaching out from prison cells, of having friends and connections that could hurt people long after they were locked away. The immediate danger might be over, but the fear that would take longer to heal. "What happens now?" Tasha asked Santos. "Now you get your life back," Santos replied. "Both of you." 3 months later, Ethan sat in his patrol car outside Lincoln Elementary School, watching children stream out of the building like water breaking through a dam. The afternoon sun painted everything gold, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the world felt like a place where good things were possible. That's when he saw her Sarah Torres, racing across the playground toward a woman waiting by the fence. Tasha looked different now. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something that might have been peace. She'd gained weight, her clothes fit properly, and when she smiled at her daughter, it reached all the way to her eyes. "Mama! Mama!" Sarah called, launching herself into Tasha's arms with the unbridled joy fatally children possess. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm reading at a 4th grade level." "That's my smart girl," Tasha said, spinning Sarah around before setting her down. "Ready to go home?" Home. They had one now, a small apartment across town, far from Rosewood Street and the Yellow House, with the cat statues. Tasha had her job back at the diner, and Sarah was thriving in school, making friends, learning to be a child again instead of a survivor. Marcus Vega was awaiting trial, held without bail on charges of domestic violence, kidnapping, witness intimidation, and a dozen other counts that would likely keep him locked away for the rest of his natural life. His network of corrupt officials was being systematically dismantled by federal investigators, and the women's shelter had received new funding for security improvements. Jake Morrison had been sentenced to time served and community service. The judge had recognized that while his actions were illegal, his intentions had been to protect a child from a dangerous situation. He was now working at a homeless shelter, trying to help other people who'd fallen through the cracks of the system. As Ethan watched Tasha and Sarah walk hand in hand toward the bus stop, he thought of Booth lessons his father had taught him all those years ago, about seeing what others missed, about understanding that evil often wore a friendly face, but so did grace. His radio crackled. "Unit 47, we have a domestic disturbance call on Elm Street." Ethan sighed, put the car in gear, and headed toward whatever crisis awaited him next, because that was the thing about being a guardian. The work never ended. There were always more people who needed protecting, more children who needed someone to notice their silent screams. But as he drove through the late afternoon sunlight, he carried with him the memory of Sarah's joy, Tasha's smile, and the knowledge that sometimes, not always, but sometimes the good guys won. But hold on there, friend. Pull that chair back up to the fire. I've got more to tell you about Thiefdermouth, because you see, when you drop a stone into still water, the ripples don't stop at the shore. They keep spreading, touching places you never expected, changing things in ways you can't always see. 2 weeks after Marcus Vega's arrest, Ethan found himself sitting across from Police Chief Margaret Walsh in her office that smelled of coffee and old leather. The chief was a woman who'd climbed through the ranks when the badge was still considered a man's job, and her steel gray eyes had seen enough darkness to appreciate the light when it appeared. "Tell me about the Torres case," she said, leaning back in her chair. Ethan had been expecting this conversation. High-profile cases always generated paperwork, reviews, questions about procedure and protocol. But something in the chief's tone suggested this wasn't about covering the department's liability. "It started with a signal," he said simply. "A 7-year-old girl who knew how to ask for help without saying a word, and ended with the dismantling of a corruption network that reached into 3 different departments," Chief Walsh added. The feds are calling it one of the most significant domestic violence prosecutions in state history. She slid a folder across her desk. I've been reading the reports. Detective Santos says you went off protocol in the parking lot. Says you could have waited for backup. Followed standard procedure. Ethan's jaw tightened. Yes, ma'am. I could have. But you didn't. No. Ma'am, I didn't. Chief Walsh studied him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. Good, because if you had, Tasha Torres would probably be dead, and Sarah would be lost in a system that Marcus Vega had already corrupted. She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. The mayor's office wants to give you a commendation. The governor's office is talking about statewide training programs based on your recognition of the help signal. And the Canadian Women's Foundation, the people who created that signal, want to fly you to Toronto to speak at their annual conference. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Chief, I was just doing my job. No, Officer Morales. You were doing what your job should be, but too often isn't. You are being human first and a cop second. She leaned forward. I've got a proposition for you. The department's starting a new unit community guardianship program. Proactive intervention, specialized. Training in recognizing abuse patterns. Direct partnerships with social services and victim advocacy groups. Sounds like social work with a badge, Ethan said. Exactly. And I want you to head it up. The offer hung in the air between them like incense, heavy with possibility and responsibility. Ethan thought of his father's voice, of the lessons learned. At a worn kitchen table, of the weight that came with truly seeing the world's pain. What about my regular patrol? This would be your regular patrol, just with a different focus. Instead of responding to crimes after they happen, you'd be looking for the signals before they become tragedies. That afternoon, Ethan drove to the house where his father still lived, the same house where he'd learned that badges don't spot evil eyes. Miguel was in his garden, tending to the tomato plants that had become his retirement passion. Papa, Ethan said, settling onto the back step, I need some advice. Miguel straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better. Days, the Torresques? You heard? Mio, the whole neighborhood heard. Mrs. Garcia's been telling everyone about the hero Capua saved the little girl. Miguel's eyes crinkled with something that might have been pride. What's troubling you? They want me to head up a new program. Specialized unit, focusing on prevention rather than response. Ethan explained the chief's offer, watching his father's face for reaction. Miguel listened without interruption, the way he always had. When Ethan finished, the old man was quiet for a long moment, studying his tomatoes as if they held answers to questions his son hadn't yet learned to ask. You remember what I told you about seeing? Miguel finally said. That a badge doesn't make. You a protector. Eyes do. That's right. But there's more to it than that. Miguel sat down beside his son, grunting slightly as his knees protested. Seeing is a burden, Mio. Once you truly see the world's pain, you can't unsee it. You become responsible for it. I'm already responsible for it. No, you respond to it. There's a difference. Response is reactive. Someone calls. You go. Responsibility is proactive. You go looking for the calls that haven't been made yet. A mockingbird landed in the garden, cocking its head at them, before launching into a complex song that seemed to contain echoes of every other bird in the neighborhood. The question you need to ask yourself, Miguel continued, is whether you're ready to carry that weight. Because once you start looking for the Sarah Torreses of the world, you're going to find them everywhere. And not all of them are going to have happy endings. That night, Ethan drove through the city with different eyes. He saw the woman at the bus stop checking her phone nervously, glancing over her shoulder every few minutes. He noticed the teenager outside the convenience store, too thin, clothes too big, counting and recounting Asmil's handful of change. He spotted the elderly man walking his dog, moving with the careful gait of someone whose ribs had been broken more than once. Signals everywhere. Once you learn to look for them. 3 months into leading the community guardianship program, Ethan stood in the gymnasium of Roosevelt Elementary School, looking out at 200 children sitting cross-legged on the polished floor. Principal Martinez had requested the presentation. After hearing about Sarah Torres' story, wanting to make sure her students knew how to ask for help when words weren't safe. "How many of you know what this means?" Ethan asked, demonstrating the help signal, 3 fingers pressed against the palm, thumb folded over. About half the hands went up, which was better than he'd expected, but not nearly enough. "This signal," he continued, "was created to help people who are in trouble but can't say so out loud. Maybe they're with someone who might hurt them if they speak up. Maybe they're scared or confused. But this signal lets them ask for help silently." A girl in the front row raised her hand. Like Sarah did? Word of Sarah's story had spread through the community with the persistence of dandelion seeds. Local news had picked it up, and regional outlets and national media. The story of a 7-year-old girl who'd learned to signal for help, and the police officer who'd seen her had struck a chord with people across the country. Exactly like Sarah did, Ethan confirmed. But here's the important part, knowing the signal isn't just for when you need help. It's also for when you see someone else who needs help. He gestured to Vanessa Reyes, who joined the program as its social services coordinator. "Ms. Reyes is going to teach you about other signs that someone might be in trouble. Things like being afraid to go home, having unexplained injuries, or being too perfect, never making mistakes because they're scared of what might happen." After the presentation, as children filed back to their classrooms, a boy lingered behind. He was maybe 10 years old, small for his age, with the kind of careful watchfulness that came from living in a world where adults couldn't always be trusted. "Officer Morales?" the boy said quietly. "What if someone you know is hurting someone else, but a person being hurt says everything's okay?" The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. This child had seen something, knew something, was carrying the weight of an adult's secret that no child should have to bear. "That's a very important question," Ethan said, crouching down to the boy's eye level. "Sometimes people who are being hurt feel like they have to say everything's okay, even when it isn't. Can you tell me more about what you're worried about?" The boy's eyes darted around the now empty gymnasium. "My mom's boyfriend, he gets really mad sometimes. And Mom always says she fell down or walked into a door, but I see him push her. I see him grab her arms and shake her. What's your name, son?" "Danny." "Danny, you did exactly the right thing by telling me. That took a lot of courage." Ethan kept his voice gentle, but inside he felt the familiar fire that came with recognizing evil wearing a familiar face. "Your mom isn't in trouble for what's happening to her, but she might need help getting safe. She says if I tell anyone, they'll take me away. Danny, I promise you, our job isn't to take children away from their parents. Our job is to help families stay together safely." Ethan pulled out one of his cards, writing his personal cell phone number on the back. "I want you to keep this. If you ever feel scared, if things get bad at home, you call me. Day or night, okay?" That afternoon, Ethan and Vanessa made a home visit to Danny's apartment. They knockagently identified themselves through the door and waited while multiple locks were returned, always a bad sign in his experience. The woman who answered was maybe 30, pretty in the way that comes from youth rather than happiness. Her makeup was carefully applied, but Ethan could see the yellow-green shadow of a healing bruise along her jawline. "Mrs. Patterson?" Vanessa said. "I'm Vanessa Reyes from Child Protective Services, and this is Officer Morales. Your son Danny spoke with us today at school. We'd like to talk with you about some concerns he raised. The woman, Lisa Patterson, according to their files, went very still. Danny's a good boy. He doesn't get in trouble. No, ma'am, he's not in trouble, Ethan assured her. But he is worried about you, and we'd like to help if we can. They spent an hour in Lisa's small living room, drinking instant coffee and talking carefully around the edges of domestic violence. Lisa insisted everything was fine, that Danny wasn't fussed, that her boyfriend Ray was just stressed about work and sometimes raised his voice but never hurt anyone. But Ethan saw the way she flinched when a door slammed in the hallway, noticed how she kept checking the clock, growing more anxious as the afternoon wore on, recognized the careful way she moved, like someone whose ribs might still be tender. Mrs. Patterson, Vanessa said finally, we're not here to judge you or force you to do anything you're not ready for. But I want you to know that there are resources available. Safe places to stay, legal advocacy, counseling services. She left a packet of information on the coffee table shelter contacts, legal aid numbers, safe day planning resources. Lisa didn't touch it while they were there, but Ethan noticed her eyes returning to it repeatedly as they walked back to their cars. Vanessa shook her head. She's not ready. Not yet, Ethan agreed. But Danny planted a seed. Sometimes that's all it takes. 2 weeks later, Ethan's phone rang at 2:30 in the morning. Danny's voice was whisper quiet and shaking with fear. Officer Morales? He's really mad this time. Mom's locked in the bathroom, and she won't come out, and there's blood on the kitchen floor. Danny, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you somewhere safe right now? I'm in my room. He doesn't know I called. Good. I want you to stay there and keep the door locked. Help is coming, okay? You did the right thing. Ethan was already reaching for his uniform shirt, his mind racing through protocols and procedures. Domestic violence calls were always dangerous. But when children were involved, the stakes became exponentially higher. The apartment complex was quiet when Ethan and 2 backup units arrived. They could hear shouting from the 3rd floor Ray's voice, loud and slurred with alcohol, demanding that Lisa open the bathroom door. They climbed the stairs quickly but quietly, weapons drawn but hoping not to need them. The apartment door was unlocked, another bad sign. Inside, they could see overturned furniture, a broken lamp, and yes, blood droplets leading from the kitchen to the hallway. Police! Everyone on the ground! Ray spun around, a large man with the glazed eyes of someone deep in a chemical haze. For a moment, Ethan thought he might fight, might force them to make the kind of split-second decision that haunted officers for years afterward. But Ray's shoulders sagged, and he sank to his knees with the defeated posture of someone would always known this day would come. The bathroom door opened slowly, and Lisa emerged with a towel pressed to her forehead, blood seeping through the white terry cloth. She looked at Ethan with eyes that held equal parts gratitude and terror. Danny called. You? She whispered. He saved your life, Ethan replied. You see, friend, that's the thing about light, it spreads. One candle lights another, and another, until suddenly the darkness doesn't seem so deep. Danny Patterson's courage to make that phone call became a story that spread through Roosevelt Elementary, then through the district, then throughout the city. 6 months after the community guardianship program launched, Ethan found himself standing in the city council chambers, looking out at a packed audience. Mayor Rodriguez had called a special session to discuss the program's expansion, and the response had been overwhelming. In our first 6 months, Ethan reported, reading from notes he'd prepared but hardly needed, the numbers were burned into his memory. We've responded to 237 intervention requests. Of those, 93 resulted in successful family preservation with support services. 47 required temporary shelter placement, and 12 led to criminal prosecutions. But the statistics, impressive as they were, didn't tell the real story. The real story was in Thephis' scattered throughout the audience, Danny Patterson. Sitting with his mother Lisa, Wano worked as a victim advocate after completing counseling and job training programs. Jake Morrison, clean-shaven and wearing the uniform of his new job as a family services coordinator. Sarah Torres, now 8 years old and reading at a 6th grade level, holding her mother's hand. More importantly, Ethan continued, we've trained over 3,000 community members in signal recognition and intervention techniques. We've established partnerships with 67 local businesses to create safe spaces for people in crisis. And we've developed a rapid response network that connects law enforcement, social services, medical care, and legal advocacy. Chief Walsh stood to address the council. The program has exceeded every expectation we had. Crime statistics in target neighborhoods have dropped by 30%. Emergency room visits related to domestic violence are down 25%. And perhaps most significantly, reports of suspected abuse have increased by 40%. Not because there's more abuse, but because people are finally comfortable coming forward. Councilwoman Chun leaned forward. What kind of training does this require for officers? Extensive, Ethan admitted. We're not just teaching law enforcement techniques anymore. We're teaching psychology, social work, trauma-informed care, de-escalation, strategies. It's a complete paradigm shift from reactive policing to preventive intervention. And the cost? Chief Walsh fielded that question. The initial investment in training and personnel was significant, but we're already seeing returns. Every family we keep intact, every child who doesn't enter the foster care system, every woman who doesn't need emergency medical treatment, and all of that saves the city money in the long run. After the formal presentation, during the public comment period, something unexpected penned. People began standing up to tell their own stories. A woman in her 40s rose from the back of the room. My name is Patricia Gonzalez. 3 months ago, I was working at Henderson's supermarket when I saw a teenage girl making fat hand signal. Because of Officer Morales' training, I knew what it meant. That girl is my niece, and she's safe now because someone taught me to see. An elderly man near the front stood slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. Robert Chun, my grandson's teacher, recognized signs of neglect and connected us with family services. Instead of losing my grandson, I got help raising him. This program doesn't just save people, it saved families. One by one they rose. The bus driver who'd learned to spot children being trafficked. The store clerk who'd noticed a pattern of injuries in a regular customer. The teacher who'd recognized that a student's perfect behavior wasn't maturity but fear. Each story was a ripple. Friend. Each person who learned to see was a stone thrown into still water, creating waves that spread further than any of us imagined. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Sarah Torres herself stood up. At 8 years old, she was the youngest person to address the city council in its history. My name is Sarah Torres, she said, her voice clear and strong despite her small size. 2 years ago, I learned a signal that saved my life. But I want you to know that signals don't just help the people who make them. They help the people who see them too. She looked directly at Ethan, sitting in the witness chair. Officer Morales taught me that being saved isn't just about being rescued. It's about learning to rescue others. That's why I'm her retinite. Because every grown-up in this room has the power to see what kids like me need help with. And every kid like me has the power to help other kids who need saving. The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, the applause began, not the polite clapping of a political meeting, but the deep, sustained appreciation of people who'd witnessed something profound. Mayor Rodriguez wiped his eyes before speaking. The council will vote on the expansion proposal next week. But I think it's safe to say We've heard enough testimony to understand theme portents of this work.